What's up everybody, Melvin here from Headphone.ph, and today we're going to be taking a look at the successor to the classic QuietComfort 35, the QC45. Let's check it out. The QuietComfort 45, which will be referenced more popularly as QC45, is the upgrade over the QC35 that first released in 2016. This one retails for $349 and it's available locally for $21,500. Alexis Marketing, also known as Bose PH, is the sole exclusive distributor of Bose products here in the Philippines, and if you're looking into Bose products, I highly suggest that you check them out. They are also the ones that sent this headphone, as well as the other Bose headphones that I reviewed in the previous years. So big shout out to them for sending this. Just like any other reviews, my opinion is not influenced by them in any way, shape, or form, and they are seeing this video at the same time you guys are seeing it as well. The QC45 is a wireless noise cancelling dynamic driver headphone, but it's one of the more compact ones. Like in terms of like overall build quality, and it's also pretty light at 238 grams. It's very similar to the QC35 headphone, and you'll hear me say that a lot throughout this review. But to be clear right from the get-go, here are the differences of the QC45 from the older QC35, all in favor of the newer model, of course. The first one is the bigger battery. So the QC45 has an average battery life of 24 hours, which is 4 hours longer than the older QC35. It also now uses USB-C for charging as opposed to the micro USB of the older model. It does have more microphones in the ear cups, while also having a different microphone structure compared to the QC35. There's also now an aware mode, which other competing headphones call as transparency mode or audio pass-through, which essentially allows you to hear your surroundings without taking off the headphone. And finally, the sound is very different, which we'll get into in a bit. There are also subtle differences in the texture of the ear pads and the headband, but outside of those, this one's quite identical to the QC35 model, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. Starting off with the packaging, you essentially have the same box here as with the QC35 and also similar set of accessories. Of course, the difference is that it now has a USB-C cable as opposed to the micro USB of the older model. But other than that, you still get a cable for passive listening, as well as this gorgeous hard-sided carry case where you can put and store your headphone for travel purposes. With the build quality, you essentially get the same all-plastic construction with some soft synthetic leather material on the ear pads and the headband, the same button placements, same cup size, same pads diameter, and essentially it's really going to be hard to tell the difference between this and the QC35 if you put them on side by side. I really like that the headphone is compact, and as you can see, it's smaller than competing noise cancelling headphones, and it also folds for better portability. If you remember, the higher end noise cancelling 700 from Bose as well doesn't have any folding features, and as a result, the carry case of that takes more space than the QC45 and QC35. As for the buttons, you get the same functionality as the older model. The center button is for playing and pausing music and answering calls. You get a volume rocker on each side for adjusting the volume, and it also doubles as a button for skipping tracks. On the left ear cup, you have this button that toggles between the noise cancelling and the aware mode, which pretty much most headphones have these days. So unlike other models, the QC45 opts for a physical button rather than a touch control, as seen in other headphones. The buttons on the QC45 are not the most clicky or tactile. The play and pause button has that okay feel when pressing it, but the volume rocker as well as the noise cancelling / aware mode are pretty mushy, and sometimes it's hard to feel if you've pressed it correctly or not. Pairing the headphone is exactly the same as how you pair your old QC35 headphone if you have it. All you gotta do is toggle the switch to the right, hold it till the pairing mode kicks in. Another advantage of this headphone is that it supports Bluetooth multi-point connection, which means it can be connected to multiple devices at the same time, unlike some other headphones like the AirPods Max. So this means that you can have the QC45 connected to your phone and laptop and other devices, and you don't need to manually disconnect the device to get other devices playing to that headphone. The increased microphones in the QC45 makes its noise cancelling performance better than the old QC35. So the QC45 is quite similar to the AirPods Max in terms of noise cancelling capabilities. So rumbling, low frequency noises are eliminated effortlessly, while some of the more varying frequencies are reduced quite a bit. Having said that though, I think it's still not as good as the XM4 from Sony's, where the Sony's are more consistent all throughout the frequencies, whereas the QC45 is right around the same with the AirPods Max and even their own noise cancelling 700. The aware mode in the QC45 is pretty average, and previously I don't really pay much attention to this feature, but the AirPods Max's transparency mode, which is the equivalent of the aware mode here, has really mesmerized me in terms of how clear the sound is from the outside, whereas the aware mode here is almost just comparable with turning off the noise cancelling capability. The QC45 has a mobile app that is available on both Android and iOS, and in that app you can actually EQ the headphone to your preference, as well as use it to control other Bose products in your possession. Battery life with the QC45 is pretty decent. I tend to use the headphone as my main work headphone for probably around 4 to 5 hours a day, and I was able to use it for at least 4 days before I need to charge it again. The slight bump in battery life compared to the QC35 is a welcome addition for this headphone, especially if you're going to be using it for long flights. Now moving on to the sound, I did mention in my review of the QC35 Mark II that I prefer its sound over the NC700. And it's because the QC35 is unapologetically a Bluetooth headphone. So it's got good tight bass, a decent warm mid-range, and a treble frequency that is reduced somewhat. And so I thought it's not trying to be something that it's not, and the overall sound is also cohesive. And that made me excited when I heard of the QC45, because I thought Bose just needed to improve the sound a bit and it'll be a slam dunk, right? Sadly, that's not the case. The QC45's frequency tuning is different than the QC35, and it's a much brighter headphone. It seems like Bose has decided to just increase everything from 2 kHz to about 5 to 6 dB, which really made the bass quantity and mid-range irrelevant if you're looking at it as a whole. So starting off with the bass, the QC45, just like the QC35, has an accentuated sub-bass and one that bleeds slightly into the lower mid-range. So looking at the graph again, the QC45 has lesser bass than the QC35, which is more correct because it means that the bleed from from the upper bass lower mids is not as severe. But in the case of the tuning of the QC45, it made the headphone less punchy than the older model. The mid-range frequencies are okay at the beginning. Lower mids and middle mid-range are like decent, I would say, for a wireless headphone, but the upper mid-range emphasis is too much that it makes that area coarse sounding or edgy, especially for vocals. And then we go into the treble, where it's just way too much. It's the kind of sound that is fatiguing and grating. And as a whole, it doesn't matter if the bass is accentuated or if there is a warm mid-range, because the bright treble tonality just masks all of those. And sadly, when you have one of the frequencies standing out so much, it really just makes everything irrelevant. So the headphone listening as a whole is fatiguing because of the excess treble energy. And considering this is a Bluetooth headphone with a Bluetooth type of sound resolution or quality, it's just not pleasant to listen to, especially for longer periods of time. And so in its stock sound profile, I can't really recommend the QC45. I think it's one of the worst sounding wireless noise cancelling headphone based on that tuning. But thankfully there's EQ, and the Bose Music app allows you to EQ the sound profile to make it more catered to your preference. And it's also pretty easy to EQ. The frequency response graphs of this headphone clearly shows excessive energy around 2 kilohertz going up until the upper treble. So all you gotta do is downshelf it starting from that, and that's what I've done. I reduced it to around 5 decibels, and that made all the difference in the world. The QC45 became balanced sounding again. It made it sound like the QC35, which isn't necessarily a good thing considering, you know, it's supposed to be an upgrade, but it made the headphone more listenable. Just like in the QC35, I didn't really hear any difference when listening to the headphone in the active wired mode. The headphone is efficient enough that it can be powered from a portable device. Do keep in mind though that the headphone has its own volume. So when I first tried it, I have my laptop in full volume and the sound was I can barely hear the sound. But all I gotta do was adjust the volume from the headphone itself, and that increased the volume quite a bit. So my headphone listening experience as a whole with the QC45 is not great, but once I EQ'd it out as mentioned, the sound became bearable and I was able to use it as my work headphone without any problems. The noise isolation performance was great. It's much better than the older model. The USB-C connectivity is also a big convenience, and the headphone is just comfortable that it's one of those that disappears on my head after some time. If you have a QC35 and are looking to upgrade to this model, it is a must that you EQ the sound of it. Otherwise, it's just way too bright and fatiguing to listen to. When EQ'd, the QC45 can sound like the older QC35, and while that doesn't sound encouraging, you gotta keep in mind that the QC45 has improvements over the QC35 in various areas such as battery life, noise cancelling performance, the new aware mode, better connectivity, which makes it a more solid buy than the older model when all is said and done. Now, if you're the type that don't EQ but still want to be in the Bose ecosystem, then the NC700 might be worth a look. It's a better sounding headphone than the QC45, although it's still bright and has that disconnection between upper mid-range and lower treble, but it's an overall better headphone than the QC45. Now, if you're willing to look for options outside of Bose, the closest recommendation would be the XM4s from Sony, which is more than a great option. It's not as compact as the QC45, but it's still fairly light. It has a ton of features, better overall sound quality, and has as great of noise cancelling capability, if not a bit better. So that's about it for this review of the Bose QC45 wireless noise cancelling headphone. A part of me likes to be proven wrong, so if you own this headphone and you can say that you like the sound better than the QC35 or the older model, please sound off in the comment section below. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe people actually dig the bright tonality, and I'd love to know. Thumbs up the video if you like it, subscribe for more headphone.ph video reviews, and visit headphone.ph for the text version of this review. I'll see you guys next time.